Welcome to 10 for 10, the podcast that delves into 10 modern Israel concepts, each for about 10 minutes. We are Dr. Tal Grinfas David and Dr. Jonathan Golden. In today's episode, we'll explore Mamlachtiyut 2.0. In our first episode in the series, we discussed the idea of Mamlachtiyut, or statism, in understanding of the social contract of Israel. To remind our listeners, Mamlachtiyut is a Hebrew term that doesn't have a direct English translation. We have been using the term statism, but it generally refers to the prioritization of state interests above all else, including political and sectoral interests. It emphasizes the idea of a strong, unified state with a focus on national goals and unity. It involves subordinating individual and group interests to the common good of the nation. In today's episode, we are asking, what does that social contract look like today, and how might it have been changed by October 7th and the war with Iran? Will the wartime national unity last, or will the internal strife and unresolved issues return? Tal, to you, what does national unity look like these days?
Well, nothing brings Israelis together from all walks of life like an external threat and a shared wartime experience. To share a few examples of Israeli unity during the 12 days of war with Iran, neighbors checked on one another and helped the elderly and infirm reach shelters during warning sirens. An app was developed to offer people's private fortified bomb shelters to strangers who didn't have access to safe spaces. Mayors, police, volunteer firefighters, and local officials stepped up in very meaningful ways to support their fellow citizens, at times even putting themselves in harm's way to save others. Organizations like Lev Echad placed citizen volunteers in key locations to help people who had lost their homes and belongings in a missile attack, providing donated clothes, food, baby formula, and diapers, and then helping to clean up the mess left behind by shattered windows with glass everywhere so that families could safely return as soon as possible to their homes to repair them. Interestingly, people in the South who were previously homeless themselves because of October 7th attacks, they started offering their homes to people in central Israel who were displaced or whose homes were targeted by Iran. I saw heartwarming videos of Arab Israeli citizens taking shelter in Jewish synagogues and being welcomed and comforted in those safe rooms. And we also saw private plane and yacht owners stepping up to bring Israeli citizens who were stuck abroad home. It felt like almost everyone was committed to getting through the fear and destruction together in the best way possible, given the tragic circumstances and the losses. The Israeli public is, of course, not perfectly united, and some people tried to take advantage of the situation for personal gain, which goes against Mamlachtiyut. There were documented cases of Israelis who were caught spying for Iran for payments, whether unwittingly or some with knowledge. There were cases of looting in areas that were hit. There were some instances of people seeking shelter with their pets who were turned away, which is a crime in Israel. And we have seen settler gangs violently attack soldiers and infrastructure for safety. Although these criminals are just a handful of the 10 million Israelis, and they are being held account for their activities, when they break the social contract, they place additional burdens on Israeli security at a time when these are already strained to the max. So the Israeli public has rightly condemned those actions. This national unity, where one's ethnicity, religion, and politics fall to the wayside, is a characteristic of Israeli resilience, Israeli nationhood, and a backing of what is understood by all to be a just war for existential defense. But 12 days of the war with Iran have not eliminated all of those bubbling political tensions from before. Discussions of the draft law have been postponed, but they remain unresolved. Judicial reform also remains a contentious and divisive issue, on display as Netanyahu's own trial continues, with interruptions for matters of national security and importance. Government deficiencies in responding to citizens' needs continue to pale in comparison to the success of the local, municipal, and volunteer organizations, especially in offering compensation to families and businesses that were both directly and indirectly affected by the war, and in planning for the safe return of some 150,000 Israelis abroad whose flights were canceled and who were clamoring to return home by any possible means. Compounding these problems, the Israeli transportation minister, Miri Regev, made some comments that were very heavily criticized, stating that while she acknowledged the distress of those stranded, she also advised patients, saying they should enjoy their time abroad while waiting for repatriation. For many who were worried about family, needed to return for medical treatments, or feared anti-Semitic attacks while paying out of pocket for the unexpected hotel and food costs, her remarks came across as flippant and insensitive. This slow and hampered response continued to deepen the mistrust of citizens in their governing officials, which in turn erodes the sense of Mamlachtiyut, that your government elected officials are supposed to serve the people, not benefit from their positions for their own personal or party gain. The criticism I heard most often is that if the attack on Iran was indeed planned for months and years in advance, how is it that the government did not plan in advance for the needs of the Israeli citizens inside and outside of the state? At the same time, the public's trust in Israel's military and intelligence services soared to an all-time high. Notably, the public disdain for the pilots' protests earlier against judicial reform and against exemptions from service for segments of society, well, that has all been restored to huge admiration and respect for the Air Force accomplishments, including those of the 16 female pilots who took part in the missions in Iran. Jonathan, I have heard many Israelis voice frustration as they juxtapose the military success in Iran with the inability to return hostages from Gaza. How do the unresolved issues in Gaza impact Israel's Mamlachtiyut and national unity?
Gaza has been a divisive issue and leaves Israeli society with more questions than answers. For many, the social contract is broken with the inability of Israel to facilitate the return of its hostages after 635 days and counting. What are Israel's options moving forward, and at what cost? In Gaza, can other nations offer security? What is the role of the United States? What about Hamas? Will Hamas be disarmed? What's the end game? And at what cost of Israeli soldiers' lives does the justification of continued war unravel? We are at a moment that triggers the public collective memory and its scars, as in the first Lebanon War, of a moment that may remain unresolved indefinitely, or that kicks the can down the road for future generations to contend with. But in the midst of this pain, there is great admiration for the so-called TikTok generation, for how much they have accomplished in their commitment to continue to serve the nation. It shows the part of the social contract of those who want to contribute to the common good. There's also great hope in Israeli populations abroad, in their contribution to the social contract of their new nations. Whether in Berlin, Boston, the Bay Area, or elsewhere, Israeli presence is impacting societies around the world, and their absence from Israel is impacting their home country. Demographic change will have a major impact on Mamlachtiyut 2.0. Tal, how does the idea of a social contract, or Mamlachtiyut, relate to our past podcast episodes?
Well, one idea is the podcast we did about collective memory. Turning points in Israel's history have left their mark on the nation's culture, artifacts, and the way people tell and retell the events that transpired. In this case, I imagine that we will be exploring what name to give this period. Will it be the War of Resurrection, the Second War of Independence, the Hamas-Iranian proxies war on Israel, or some other name depending on what the final outcomes will be. We will likely play the songs from this period on future days of mourning or commemoration, and more permanent art installations and andartaot, or memorials, monuments, will be commissioned and erected throughout Israel. I am sure that many aspects of Israel's response to the war will remain classified for several years, and that as sources are allowed to be published over time, we will be able to tell the national history of this moment with better clarity.
That's right. Another podcast that comes to mind is our episode about Jewish immigration and emigration. Both immigration and emigration are an indicator of the health or lack thereof of the social contract. As Israelis return to Israel in droves to support their country, they signal their commitment to Mamlachtiyut. And there are also immigrants from around the world, from Ukraine, from France, Great Britain, South Africa, just to name a few countries, who are committed to playing their part in Israel's Mamlachtiyut 2.0, making Aliyah even in times of war.
A third idea is how Israel is viewed around the world and whether Israel will be able to secure the recognition of allies that have seemingly abandoned it and of new allies in the region by expanding the Abraham Accords. Israel's international advocacy after October 7th was insufficient, giving way to anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist narratives. After demonstrating its military prowess in Iran, Israel regained the justification for its right to defend itself. Recalling episode 6, when we discussed contemporary frameworks for understanding the modern state, R, from the acronym of power, standing for recognition, will be a critical lens through which to examine not only the past 2 years, but also the long-term consequences and agreements this period will yet yield. Using Maslow's hierarchy, we acknowledge that citizens all over the world are asking basic questions about the role of government and how it best functions to support their needs. In light of this, government reform and change fit a conversation that could be had in any country. Who do we choose for the problems of our times? And how do technology and the instant communication it affords influence our decisions? In Israel and around the world, media coverage has been a powerful influence on public opinion. So this generation will need to become incredibly adept at recognizing bias in the news and how information is relayed, especially as our young people make informed decisions about who to vote for and which policies to support. If political parties worldwide are changing as a result, how will Israel's politics either lead global conversations or present new challenges?
And that question you just posed relates to a fourth episode that we covered when discussing statism or Mamlachtiyut, and that's about leadership quality and decision makers. Mamlachtiyut demands leadership that puts the public interest above self-interest. The current Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has been presented both as an unpopular political divisive figure and as a national war hero. His transformation demonstrates his ability to reinvent himself and the state, and it also demonstrates his use of technology, messaging, and strategic communications to the Israeli nation and to the entire world. In the coming weeks and months, will the unity behind his leadership wane after the war is over? And will he continue to pursue a divide and conquer approach to politics? Or alternatively, will a new consensus emerge in Israeli politics either around him or in a post-Netanyahu era? How will the projections for election results drive his ability to hold on to leadership and offer him the opportunity to make decisions about his legacy and the policies that have long challenged the unity of the Israeli public? Tal, what do you think is the social contract of world Jewry towards Israel and the Jewish people as a whole?
Well, I see this as a fundamental question about how Jews in the diaspora identify, meaning, do Jews view themselves as members of a religion or as members of a nation that share a deep sense of belonging to the land, the people, and the state of Israel? Belonging implies caring about a common future and investing in that future in a myriad of ways. Over this podcast series, we've given examples of individuals who made aliyah, served the state in some capacity, donated money, volunteered, gave their time and expertise in times of crisis, and who have left Israel also to give of themselves to diaspora communities. Jonathan, which national and international organizations do you want to highlight as acting in the social contract of Mamlachtiyut?
Many examples come to mind, but in terms of organizations doing the work of upholding the social contract for all who live in the land, I want to highlight 4 examples. First, Givat Chaviva, an organization dedicated to promoting mutual responsibility, civic equality, and cooperation between divided groups in Israel as a foundation for building a shared future and shared society. Second, the Arava Institute, which advances cross-border environmental and academic cooperation through academic programs, internships, seminars, and research initiatives. Third, the Abraham Initiatives, an organization that works to advance a shared society of coexistence and equality among Israel's Jewish and Arab citizens by promoting programs that model inclusive public policy and institutional reform in the areas of education, leadership, safe community, equitable policing, and minority mainstreaming in the media. And finally, I want to note Our Generation Speaks, an organization that identifies Israeli and Palestinian women and men who desire to build an infrastructure of hope through both business and social entrepreneurship. Tal, do you have any closing thoughts as we conclude our series?
Well, first, it has been such a pleasure talking with you, Jonathan, and getting to know all your thoughts about Israel. I've learned so much from you. We know that so many fundamental issues remain contentious and unresolved, but they have become a secondary priority in the days of war and in the days of peace seeking. These issues won't go away. How leaders and individuals in and outside of Israel choose to act in the aftermath will determine the level of Mamlachtiyut and the nature of the Jewish and democratic state going forward. I'm sure that the new grassroots movements that will rise, just as they did in the past, will also influence Israel's Mamlachtiyut. It's in all of our hands. To our listeners, we hope you enjoyed listening to 10 for 10. We hope you're interested in learning more about Israel, and we are excited to have you join us for our second series. Please visit our Family and Educator Guide with discussion prompts, additional resources, and a list of local and national and international organizations that might spark an interest for how you can contribute to Israel's future and its Mamlachtiyut. And if you would like to submit a response to any of our episodes, please visit the guide to learn how to do so. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much. This national unity, where one's ethnicity, religion, and politics fall to the wayside, is a characteristic of Israeli resilience, Israeli nationhood, and a backing of what is understood by all to be a just war for existential defense.